Polis mengesahkan tiada unsur jenayah melibatkan kematian pemaju hartanah bergelar Datuk yang maut akibat terjatuh dari sebuah kondominium di Jalan Kelawai, Pulau Pinang. Datin Seri Rosmah Mansor tidak dapat menahan emosi dan menangis ketika memberi keterangan di Mahkamah Tinggi Kuala Lumpur pada Rabu. Malaysia boleh menjadi negara pengeluar vaksin manusia dalam tempoh 10 tahun melalui Pelan Hala 7 pembangunan vaksin negara yang akan dilancarkan dalam masa terdekat. Laporan penuh di saluran 501 dan Astro AWANI.com.
Hello and good evening. I'm Melissa Idris.
And I'm Sharad Putin.
Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. Myanmar has been in turmoil since the coup in February ended a decade of democratization. Now, 88 months on, more than 1,000 civilians have been killed by the country's security forces, and many of the ousted government, including Aung San Suu Kyi's government, are either on trial or in jail. Joining us on the show to discuss post-coup Myanmar, we have our first guest tonight, Debbie Stoddart. She's the founder of the democracy advocacy group Alternative ASEAN Network on Burma. Debbie, can we begin our conversation looking at Aung San Suu Kyi's trial? I'm just wondering what impact you see coming out of this ongoing trial.
Well, basically it's judicial persecution of Aung San Suu Kyi. It's gotten so bad that they keep leveling more and more charges on her, that if those convictions carry through, she would be subjected to several decades jail time, which means that she'll probably have to serve her jail term into the next life, since Burma is a Buddhist country and believes in reincarnation. But in reality, the military junta's leader, the head of the coup, Senior General Min Aung Hlaing, is paranoid about Aung San Suu Kyi's popularity and the popularity of the National League for Democracy, which won by a landslide in the past two elections. So we also need to understand that the coup is not complete. The junta is not in control of the country. It's not been able to secure territorial, political, or economic control of the country. 8 months after 8 months of brutal attacks and systematic attacks on civilians across the country, they still do not have control.
Debbie, could you help us understand why it is that they haven't been able to establish control? And do you think that in their own mind, in launching this coup, that they thought that this would be rather easy to do?
I think they really had a fantasy of a somewhat bloodless coup, that there would be an initial resistance, and all they had to do was arrest a few people, intimidate them, and everything, and then they'd be in control. But in reality, I think a lot of people, not just the military, but around the world, underestimated the people of Burma in their desire for freedom and democracy. They had to deal with decades of military rule. They had a brief period of opening up, and they used it to their full advantage. So when the coup came on the 1st of February, young people refused to accept it. And it's amazing. It's still young people, including women, who have an amazing leadership of this movement. And it's also hardly the reason that the military has been targeting children and young people for arrests and torture.
Can we talk a little bit about that? What has been the humanitarian cost of this? I mean, we have news reports citing 1,000 civilians being killed by security forces, but what has been the ripple effect of that?
Well, in reality, what it means is that if you're in Burma, Myanmar, regardless of whether you're in a city or in a village, you are vulnerable to military attack. And you're vulnerable to increase your vulnerability to attack also increases when there's been some type of protest or resistance to the military. In Sagaing region in the west, for example, a lot of police actually left the junta. They defected and joined the local people, and that's why that area has been targeted by the military junta for very extreme violence. And when we talk about violence, it's not just about killing, shoot snipers and grenade launches on civilians. They've actually been launching airstrikes on little towns and villages using attack helicopters and also fighter jets to bomb people. In Kaya or Karenni state in the east of the country, half of the state's population has been displaced in the past few months because of military attack. So can you imagine, half of KL is homeless because of violence, because of attack by the government.
Yeah,
that's basically what we're looking at.
Debbie, the I mean, almost unthinkable level of brutality you mentioned earlier, is appalling. I'm just wondering about things that might shift the dynamics. There is an economic cost, and the military itself is suffering as an organization that is deeply integrated into a Burmese economic life with its control of conglomerates and such. Do you think that might actually help turn the tide, the kind of economic meltdown that we are told Burma is suffering?
The economy is in free fall. Since the coup, the Myanmar Chart has lost more than half of its value. 80% of all banks and banks branches have been shut down in the country. Partly it's because of the military's own disproportionate use of violence against protests and dissent. But the other part of it is that local people have been refusing to pay taxes and refusing to pay their electricity bill and have launched domestic boycotts against military products like beer and consumer goods. So what local people have been trying to do is to grow food to feed themselves and to feed each other. And we've seen amazing scenes of local young people donating food in the street. But when the military authorities see that, they actually attack these acts of charity, saying that these are supposed to be anti-government resistance. So we see, people are helping each other out. They're doing the best they can, and it's no thanks to the military authorities. And considering that the country is in the grip of a very harmful and painful third wave of the COVID pandemic. People are getting sick and dying of the Delta variant in Myanmar, and the military has actually been attacking health workers and arresting health workers because they're suspected of joining the civil disobedience movement. So this is an unimaginably difficult situation for ordinary people, but they have been really determined to resist and to help each other.
Debbie, it's been 8 months since the coup. What do you think will likely help trigger or break this stalemate?
I think most of the military are starting to understand that this coup was sparked by Senior General Min Aung Hlaing's own personal ambition. And his ambition, this coup has actually severely undermined and destroyed the economic well-being and the wealth of individual military families who took advantage of the economic boom during the transition period. So I think gradually they are going to have to get to the point where they have more courage to depose Min Aung Hlaing. There's an internal coup within the military, and peace talks are opened up. I think this is going to have to be inevitable. But given that we're seeing more and more targeted sanctions against military and military businesses, and even a new bill proposed in the US Congress yesterday, the main push is targeted economic sanctions and weapons sanctions to prevent the military from having the means to inflict more damage on civilian communities.
Right. Debbie, thank you so much for joining us on the show tonight. Debbie started there from the Alternative ASEAN Network on Burma. We're going to take a quick break, but we'll come back and touch on that US bill that Debbie talked about, the Burma Act, and whether this could have an impact on the situation in Myanmar. Stay tuned to consider this.
Ayuh keluarga Malaysia, kita bulatkan tekad dan bersatu hati untuk terus memelihara serta mempertahankan kedaulatan negara. Sebagai keluarga Malaysia yang besar, kita harus bertoleransi dalam semua perkara. Hormat menghormati serta mengekalkan perpaduan rakyat yang berbilang kaum, agama dan bangsa serta integrasi nasional silang budaya adalah tunjang kekuatan kita sebagai sebuah negara bangsa yang berjaya. Umpama selembar benang dikait, ditenun dan dijalin, akhirnya menjadi kain yang sempurna indah.
Amanah di tangan kita.
Hi, you're watching Consider This. I'm Melissa Idris. With me is Sharad Kutin. If you've just joined us on the show, we're discussing the situation in Myanmar 8 months on from the coup in February. Now, with an added economic and public health crisis, what's in store for post-coup Myanmar? Joining us now is Cho Win, Executive Director of the Burma Human Rights Network and spokesperson for the Myanmar Muslim Multi-Ethnic Consultative Committee. Cho, what has been the humanitarian cost of clamping down on dissent? I mean, what kind of toll are we looking at in terms of the lives lost, in terms of arrests and detentions and disappearances?
Well, thanks for having me here today. I think it is, if I tell you in one word, it is terrible, because you see that the young people who did the protest peacefully on the street, they've been killed, butchered by the snipers. The military deployed snipers and killed them. And also they use all kinds of tortures and all kind of crimes they have committed. So what we see is so for example, some people has been arrested in the evening time, and next day morning they receive letter or call from the authorities that their loved one has been killed during the interrogation. And some people, they look at their bodies. It was terrible. They look like, the way they've tortured it's like they don't have any humanity. I think they have lost everything. So there's really cruelty is beyond the limit the military is committing in Burma now. So we have been monitoring on the situation along since the situation is happening. We have now we learned that nearly 1,500 people has been killed so far.
Okay.
Sure. We understand that in tabling the Burma Act in the US, the American government is committed to, among many things, to investigating the claims of genocide in the Rakhine Rohingya issue. Do you see that in the conduct of the military over the last 8 months, is there a case for alleging crimes against humanity, against the junta, in its post-coup dealings with the civilian population?
If I tell you this, we have recently we published on 28th July a report conducted by a very senior legal expert, and we come to the conclusion that Burma has, the Burmese military has committed crime against humanity. Is a very clear evidence we have, and we have been thousands of evidences, that. And if you talk about evidences, that there are overwhelmingly, evidence we have that to prove the Burmese military is committing crime against humanity. But don't forget that this is the same military that committed genocide against Rohingya in 2017, according to UN fact-finding mission. So we strongly welcome the Burma Act 2021. This is very timely things, and it is very important to do something such a thing. But importantly, regarding sanction, we strongly suggest international community must impose on energy sector, oil and gas, Myanmar oil and gas enterprise. This is one of the most money-making enterprise for Burmese military. So this right. Must be targeted.
Chow, can I just ask you? I mean, on that note of international intervention, I'm just wondering, what do you think might help with break this current situation in Burma? We just heard Debbie start out before the break, and she seems to think that perhaps it might be an internal coup within the military that might bring down the junta. But what do you think? Do you think that this might be resolved through international intervention?
I mean, what we see is, that they are day by day, every day, the military, from the military side, they are joining the PDF, the NUG government, the arms group and EAOs. So there are many, nearly more than 2,000. We heard is more than 1,000, something like that. So we think that if we continue gradually, there will be, they are losing manpower, and international community right now immediately need to do is recognize the NUG government. This is the government the people have democratically elected, and they win the election, and all people in Burma supported. And the role of ASEAN also is very important here, and because we must not allow the military who killing the people and overthrow a democratically elected government, and we must not recognize them. We must not give them any seat that represent Burma. That's very dangerous what ASEAN is doing now.
Right, sure. I want to ask you, since you're the spokesperson also for the Myanmar Muslim Multi-Ethnic Consultative Committee, about some sort of the deep ironies of this coup, which is it seems to have made some segments of Burmese society recognize the disservice or the oppression that they have wrought on their Muslim citizens. What is the sentiment on the ground now, especially with regard to the Muslim community?
Well, the anti-Muslim ideology is not only anti-Muslim ideology, it is about religious-based ethno-nationalism is very strong in Burma. And this is the idea which all the minorities is facing atrocities. And this is the idea the military has taken free right to oppress minorities and to concrete their power. So we have to deal with the very root cause. Religious-based ethno-nationalism is one of the root cause all the problem in Burma. So it is not only the Muslim angle we cannot look at it, because we have to look at it full picture. All the Christian minorities, Buddhist minorities, and other Buddhist minorities, and Hindus and Muslims, they're all facing problems and difficulties and atrocities because of this man-made mindset. We have to deal with this first. This is the ideology which is, they're very dangerous and toxic.
Right. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. Oh, sure. Yes.
What we have seen is on the ground is after the coup happened, people come closer to each other. We don't have any barrier like religion or race. All we see is we have only one enemy. This is a military. This is the enemy of the people. We have to take them down. Otherwise, we cannot continue our life under this ruthless and cruel regime. So this is determined for every community, everyone, and that is why we Muslim in Burma decided that yes, we have to take some step. This is the time we have to do our role. We have to play our role. But what we have concern is there is rules in Burma, laws. There are many laws that discriminating, especially to Muslim community, like 1982 citizenship law. This we has been repeatedly asking to NUG government to abolish that law. But unfortunately, maybe there is some differences within the NUG that they are not able to abolish it. But we hope one day they can do this.
All right. Chowin, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Chowin there from Burma Human Rights Network. We're going to take another quick break here and consider this, but we will be back with more, so stay tuned.
Ayuh keluarga Malaysia, kita bulatkan tekad dan bersatu hati untuk terus memelihara serta mempertahankan kedaulatan negara. Sebagai keluarga Malaysia yang besar, kita harus bertoleransi dalam semua perkara. Hormat menghormati serta mengekalkan perpaduan rakyat yang berbilang kaum, agama dan bangsa serta integrasi nasional silang budaya adalah tunjang kekuatan kita sebagai sebuah negara bangsa yang berjaya. Umpama selembar benang dikait, ditenun dan dijalin, akhirnya menjadi kain yang sempurna indah.
Hi, thank you so much for staying with Shrad and I on Consider This. We continue our look at the situation in Myanmar 8 months on from the February 1st coup. Joining us now is Aung San Suu Kyi. He is the co-founder of the NGO Forces for Renewal Southeast Asia, better known as 4C. That's based in the UK. Zaini, welcome to the show. The US has just introduced the Burma Act, or if I may with the full name, Burma Unified Through Rigorous Military Accountability Act of 2021. That seems to signal a strong desire to take action against the junta. And I'm just wondering whether you think the Burma Act might have an impact on the current political and violent turmoil in Myanmar.
Well, one thing that stands out, from this Burma Act that was introduced, I believe yesterday in the U.S. Congress, is targeting of, Myanmar oil and gas sector that has pumped billions of foreign revenues in dollars for the Burmese, essentially a terrorist organization called the the caretaker government. And so that is something that is positive. And then the other element is, it is asking the Biden administration to call a spade a spade. That is to say, to basically, declare that Burma has committed a genocide against Rohingya Muslims. So that is very important as well. And so but the problem is the United States is increasingly anti-China, rightly or wrongly, and it sees Burma and ASEAN as a whole through its prism of essentially, containing the China's expansionist ambitions, military might, economic and political influence. And so I think there is going to be, pushback from Biden administration that is already on a war footing with China. The U.S. has declared right after its, very disgraceful and disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, that it is building a military alliance with the two other Anglophone countries, United Kingdom and Australia, to build a nuclear power submarines in Australia. And currently, the temperature across the Taiwan Strait is on the rise. And so there are signs that, that are disheartening in terms of, support from Washington for the Burmese uprising and continuing resistance and the crimes against humanity that the Burmese military is committing on a daily basis against its own citizens.
Right. So, Zani, you're basically pointing out the difference between what Congress has put out and what the Biden administration might act on. But I wonder if you could help us understand the response of the junta to this. They still are recognized by ASEAN. They've been shopping around with friends. Russia seems to have come into the picture. I don't know how frosty their relationships with China are. That used to be quite friendly with the Aung San Suu Kyi government. In terms of the space for Myanmar for the junta to maneuver, is it closing in on them, or do they have pretty much wiggle room to assert themselves for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, Shara, you're absolutely right. I mean, the question about how much wiggle room that the Myanmar terrorist regime has when it is, still considered essentially a part of the ASEAN, and to his credit, the Malaysian foreign minister and of course, like Malaysia as a member state, the issue of not inviting the head of the coup regime that will in due course be indicted by the International Criminal Court for its crimes against humanity, particularly against the Rohingya back in 2017. So I think the junta still has enough wiggle room. This is the regime that has survived years of sanctions, and so unless we see the multilateral sanctions that the United States was able to put together through international coalition against Saddam Hussein's regime around 2000, I think the military will still able to endure this economic vice. However, that said, I think there are no silver bullets and there are no military interventions, and even that is whether it's desirable after Afghanistan and what happens in the Middle Eastern countries is extremely debatable. But I think what needs to happen within the region is to recognize that Burma has been the problem child of ASEAN, the black sheep, a criminal regime that is facing multiple international legal actions at the International Court of Justice ongoing, and then the universal jurisdiction case filed in Argentina by the Rohingya community, and of course, like the International Criminal Court is going ahead with this full investigation. You also have the United Nations mandated the independent investigative mechanism that is compiling cases, thousands of them, or not, if not thousands, but looking at thousands of videotaped and other documents and evidence that could be used as part of future international criminal tribunal against today's Burmese military leaders.
Thank you so much, Zarni. That was Maung Zarni from Forces of Renewal Southeast Asia, wrapping up this episode of Consider This. Before we leave you, a reminder that you can get the latest information on COVID-19 vaccines on astroawani.com, as well as the Astro Awani app. I'm Melissa Idris.
And I'm Sharad Kuttan, signing off for the evening.
Thank you so much for watching. Good night.